is pretending to read still fine? Only if you use it to punch down on someone. Only if you can scoff at somebody for not reading. Speaking of that, wait! Let's all listen. There's one thing that millennials and Gen Z can both agree on. Gen Z a little too much. It's shitting on Gen Alpha for being illiterate. I just saw a video from a guy who looked like a homeless man. No disrespect to this guy, Jared Henderson. I've never heard of him, so I'm sure I'm going to find out that he advocates for child labor or something. But I got this recommended, and it said the American Literacy Crisis Explained. I want to learn about American literacy crisis. Because my understanding is that like most people cannot, I think over half, cannot read at a 6th grade level in America, which is tough. And then there's like a good chunk of people, like a fourth, who are functionally illiterate. As in they know like a few key words like exit on an exit sign or like burger on a menu or whatever, but they can't actually read a full, let's say, paragraph and understand the meaning. They can't, but you know, that's a problem for something. Like if your goal is to get everyone on the same page with certain ideas, that's a problem. Not for me, I'm a YouTuber, I don't give a shit, you know? In fact, I personally have meetings with other YouTubers where we talk about how we need to get literacy rates down because the more you read, the less you watch. Do you understand? For me, it's actually in my business interest to make sure that you read as little as possible, which is why I've been reading so much more, is because then you can offload your reading to me.
Where you look, you will see the headlines. Kids these days don't know how to read. Literacy is on the decline, kids don't read for pleasure anymore, and some want to say that we are living through a literacy crisis. You'll even see some claim that 40% of American kids can't read. That's not true, by the way, and we're going to talk about that later in this video.
Okay.
Are we living through
I'm
a
wrong.
literacy crisis, or is this just a long-standing failure dressed up as something new?
I'm wrong.
If you want to understand the American literacy crisis, you need to know 3 numbers. First up, 40%. That's the percentage of American 4th graders who cannot read at what's called a basic level. Every few years, students around the country take a test called the National Assessment.
Wait, so how am I wrong? Wait, so how am I wrong? That's what I heard. Well, how did you open by saying that's wrong, by the way? Okay, I'm gonna let him talk.
Of Educational Progress, or the NAEP.
Okay.
This is also sometimes called the nation's report card, and it allows us to track educational progress throughout the country.
Is it more?
Reading scores have remained relatively stable since 1992 until 2019, when they started to decline. Sometimes that's reported as saying that 40% of students can't read, but that's not what those statistics mean.
Okay.
So now 40% of 4th graders can't read at what's considered a basic level, and only 31% can read at what's considered a proficient level. The NAEP also defines those terms, and just because a kid can't read at basic level doesn't mean that they can't read. But the literacy crisis doesn't stop at it.
Okay. So the asterisk here is that can't read does but that's I think that's what I was saying, which is like you can pick out some words, you know, you can the alphabet, but like when I say read, I mean like if you wrote, here's what it is. It's like an SAT question, right? Where they have a paragraph and then you have to answer a question showing you understood the paragraph. I don't think people can do that. I don't think people can not people, but a lot of people can't read a chunk of words and then have that become a message in their mind and then write about it.
Elementary schools.
Comprehension.
And that brings us to our second number, 28%. That's the share of US adults that are at the lowest level of literacy. In the last decade, that number has increased by 9 points.
Okay.
This doesn't mean that those adults can't read, but it does mean that they are what's called functionally illiterate. This means that they lack literacy skills which would allow them to navigate the world and go about their day-to-day task. And our final number is 21.
Okay.
That's Mississippi's ranking in 4th grade literacy as of 2022. In 2013, Mississippi was ranked 49th. They were basically at the bottom of the country's rankings, and now they are well above the middle. And that's because they saw the problem, and they actually tried to solve it.
Interesting.
So at the end of this video, we're going to talk about what Mississippi has done right. But first, we're going to take a slightly closer look at that NAEP data. Literacy scores have been declining since 2019. This might not be that surprising because something...
I mean, I like hearing something that breaks my narrative. If you asked me, what does Mississippi rank as in American reading, I would have said 50th or 49th. I would have said that today. So to know that it's like closer to the middle in recent years from some effort or change they've made. It's cool. It's cool to know. I actually am excited to learn more about it because that is, that changes my understanding.
Rather big happened in 2020, which caused a lot of school closures, and we've generally seen learning loss across the board. Absenteeism is also up post-COVID, which does complicate actually teaching kids how to read. One group of student hasn't seen it.
I do want to say, sorry, I'm interrupting this guy, but I don't know if he's going to talk about this. I truly think, man, that it is so fucked that kids' first exposure to reading is always a boring ass book. There's books that are fun and it's just not, do you know what I'm like? I just think if people read Red Rising or I don't know, you know what I'm just, or Harry Potter back in the day or what, Harry Potter's a good example, but like what do kids have now for Harry Potter? Or kids got Pendragon back in the day, or what was the Greek guy? The Percy Jackson or Aragon. Those books rule. Kids read these books and it's fun. You get a bonus out of it and it improves your ability to comprehend and you're learning passively. Hunger Games also good.
Decline in their test scores though. These are students who are already.
Did anyone, sorry, there's one more interruption. Did you guys ever, who's of the age that read Pendragon? Because Pendragon was like a little young for me, but I still read it. So it should be people that are slightly younger than me. If you're like late 20s, maybe mid 20s. If you're like 24 to 30, you're probably Pendragon age, I probably guess. Okay. And I just want to say that the Pendragon book about the world he travels to, where they like plug into the Matrix and it's a fun VR game and they stop caring about the real world and it slowly melts down around them and then it ends with a dark ending, was like one of the best books for a younger audience I've ever read in my entire life. And probably the most prescient, probably the most like forward thinking. That book was so dark and powerful and good, and it was just written for children. And it stuck with me more than a lot of books that I've read, even more as an adult. That's an incredible book. Pendragon, the Reality Bug. This is gas. This shit was gas.
In the 90th percentile. So what we're seeing is a widening gap between those students who are reading quite well and those students who are struggling to read at a basic level. This tells us something important. If we want to improve American literacy, the biggest impact we can have is by focusing on those students who are struggling to read the most. And that's going to be important when we talk about Mississippi in a few minutes. But even those top performing...
But isn't this about what you measure? Because like, okay, if you're measuring your ability to read books, then the bottom half of students are falling behind. But if you measure the ability to understand TikToks, I bet the nerds at the top are falling behind. I bet their TikTok literacy is an all-time low. They don't know the latest memes. They don't know what the jokes are. We don't know what's trending. They're probably behind. Like you might say something and they won't even fucking get it. Doesn't it feel like they need to be focused on as well? Like, what if you're culturally dumb? Street smarts versus book smarts. Yeah, like what if they don't know what chopped huzz means? What if you know what Shakespeare is, but you don't know what chopped huzz means? Well, then you're kind of actually behind in the modern day.
Students, like the students who would go on to study at really great colleges and universities, are also struggling. At the University of Texas here in Austin, some professors told their school newspaper that they would be shortening reading assignments and transitioning to assigning things like YouTube videos and audiobooks instead of...
Let's go! Let's fucking go! Get a Marketing Monday into the schools! And I'm gonna get paid. I'm gonna get fucking paid. Dude, I just gotta stop cursing. That's the biggest problem. I just gotta stop cursing and make an educational channel and then start selling this shit to schools. I'm gonna put this on 2x speed.
Physical books because students simply didn't have the patience for the reading assignments anymore. One professor was told by his students that Shakespeare's Hamlet was...
Sorry, I'm putting on 2x speed, get on my phone, barely pay attention, and then 4 days later when I've forgotten even the little bit that I knew, I'm gonna start commenting angrily like I'm an expert. Now I can say, yeah, I actually know a lot about this. I actually know a lot about literacy. And let me tell you, you don't
It's too long to read. Now,
Anyway,
Hamlet is the longest Shakespeare play, but it is about 30,000 words.
I can't
It's
actually do this because it hurts my fucking brain, but I understand.
shorter than the vast majority of novels out there. These professors cited things like the rise of video content, but also phone usage, as leading to a decline in their students' reading abilities. But they've decided that they have to give in and change with the times so that they can meet their students where they are. That same professor who was told that Hamlet was too long, he used to teach 10 plays per semester. He's now teaching 6 in his classes. So even college students at good schools are struggling to read, and many of them are going to become adults who hardly read at all. Many Americans simply don't read books, and I think about 10% of college graduates haven't read a book in the last year. They don't know how to read, and maybe that's
You know what would be fucking dope to turn this around? The novelization of Subway Surfers. Tell the stories people want to hear. Okay? The novelization. When I was a kid, I watched Star Wars Episode 1, and I loved it so much that I got the book, the Star Wars Episode 1 novelization, where it just wrote down the things I had just watched in the movie. And I loved that book. That book was fire. I assume a Subway Surfers clip would also make a great book.
That's because they haven't been taught how to be a good reader. All right, let's pause for a second and ask ourselves what it means to be a good reader. The psychologist Daniel Willingham has this book called The Reading Mind. And in this book, he points out that reading is actually a fairly demanding task. First, you have to be able to understand the words on the page, and that's usually what we mean when we say that we're teaching kids to read.
Not for
But
LeBron.
actually, reading involves 3 additional levels of representation. You need to be able to extract ideas from sentences. You need to be able to then connect the idea across those sentences, and then you integrate this within a model in your mind that answers the question of what the text is about. And Willingham notes that many readers fail at the second level. They're not able to point out obvious contradictions in a paragraph that they read. If you're not reading at a level where you could even catch obvious contradictions, then you're going to struggle when you're reading sets of instructions or complicated forms. And really that contributes to what we called functional illiteracy before. That's that illiteracy that makes it difficult for you to navigate your day-to-day life. Being able to connect ideas is actually a skill.
It's interesting because I think the whole point of it existing is that it doesn't make it difficult anymore. Is that people don't need it. It doesn't impact their day-to-day life at all, is what I would say. That's my assumption, is that they don't, it doesn't impact the day of their life. So why would they learn? They don't have the incentive.
That you have to develop. And I found that when I was teaching philosophy at some universities, that skill was something that my college students still needed to develop. I found that the worst question I could possibly ask when I started a discussion of some text in the classroom was, what is this text about? Because most students could tell you what some of the sentences said, but they weren't able to form a picture of the cohesive whole. That meant that I had to guide them through interpreting a text. I would have to ask them questions like, what is the thesis of this article or this book or whatever it was that we were reading? Where are the arguments and the evidence for that thesis? And then, is there any irrelevant or unnecessary information in the text? This was a process that I would guide my students through so that they could learn how to read better. But there was another barrier that my students faced, which is that they lacked a lot of background knowledge, which helped them make sense of a text. Let's say you want to read a really big book like War and Peace. Well, War and Peace is a historical novel. It is set in a particular time and place. You don't need to know all of the historical details in order to make sense of War and Peace. But having some idea of European history and maybe France's connection to Russia, knowing who people like Napoleon or Louis XVI are, these are things that would be useful for you as you're reading. It would make reading War and Peace a less demanding task. And I found that a lot of my students lacked historical knowledge or just general world knowledge, which would make reading books easier. I think part of this has to do.
It does feel like it's kind of fun. It's like watching Oppenheimer without knowing who Einstein is. So when they have the big reveal of him, it doesn't mean anything. It's just another random ass character. It's just, if you don't have the cultural context, or it's, watching Passion of the Christ without knowing who Jesus Christ was, just thinking it's a character. It's like watching Star Wars without knowing who Glub Shido is. He ties the whole fucking narrative together.
Do with the fact that at some point we started to emphasize critical thinking over memorization of facts. You can find this a lot in popular discussions of pedagogy. The idea is that you should teach students how to think rather than what to think. And There's some truth to that, but I think there's a crucial error that's being made there, which is that actually learning about the world and learning facts about the world goes hand in hand with learning how to think critically, because it allows you to build a mental model of the world, and you can see where new facts might fit in or where they actually contradict things that you should already know. Critical thinking and memorization might actually go hand in hand, and they help us to produce better readers. Now, some experts...
I don't give a shit. People should memorize more. Low key. People should do times tables. People... Practice and the basics are, they can learn the rest on their own. They can find something they're interested in. Give them the basics, dude. Drill the tools, the meat and potatoes. Yeah, exactly. I fucking agree. I think that shit works.
Do not want to call this a crisis. One researcher from Harvard University described American reading education as a very stable level of mediocrity. We've never done a great job, and things have been getting a little bit worse, but this isn't new, and it's certainly not unprecedented.
Until COVID.
And there is a lot of fear-mongering about this. Let me tell you about the National Literacy Institute. If you've seen those headlines I mentioned about American literacy, there's a chance that you've seen statistics from this website. For instance, you might have heard that 21% of American adults are illiterate. But actually look at the website, and I'll put a link down below as well. There's no explanation for that number, about 21% of American adults being illiterate.
It must be true.
No definition is also given of what they mean by illiterate. And the numbers you find on this website are painting a much worse picture than the numbers that you find elsewhere. I actually emailed the National Literacy Institute to ask them where they got these numbers and if they could explain some of them to me, but I did not hear back. And if that changes...
Kids these days don't even know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's a damn shame. It's a damn shame, dude. The mitochondria is working its ass off in your cell. It is the fucking powerhouse, dude. It is the Jokic on the Nuggets, if that makes any sense. It is pushing that shit to game 7 versus a much better team. And it's just wild that we don't know about that. We just don't.
But between the time of recording and the time of posting, I will issue a correction. I'd be happy to do it. But some fact checkers reached out to the NLI in 2024, and they also never heard back. Those fact checkers concluded that the NLI was using an overly expansive definition of illiterate. They were also misdescribing the data that they were citing, and they were misleadingly describing their data as new, when in fact this data does not come out on an annual basis. National Literacy Institute is just another name for the National Literacy Professional Development Consortium. That's a private company that sells professional development courses for teachers. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, teachers often need more professional development as they further their careers. But the fact that they call themselves the National Literacy Institute sometimes makes it seem like they're a research center, and it gives a lot of authority to the things that they put on their website. And I've noticed that people will cite this website uncritically.
What is this part of the video?
I've even seen other YouTubers cite this when they talk about American literacy. I don't think those YouTubers were trying to mislead you. I think that they had the best intentions, but I think they got fooled. But seriously, look at the website again. There's no sources. There's no research methods. There's nothing like that. It's just bullet points and numbers. Where did the numbers come from? Well, the website doesn't tell you. I think anyone honestly looking at this data would say that there is a real problem with literacy in America. But we have to be able to say that there's a problem without engaging in fear-mongering or simply lying about it. Okay. Fear-mongering might even give you the impression that this is a problem that can't be solved. And that's not true. Like I mentioned before, some states have started to find solutions, like Mississippi.
Yeah, tell me about
Between
this.
2013 and 2022, Mississippi students dramatically improved their reading scores.
Look at this.
This was a period where most states saw a decline. This was such a dramatic improvement that some commentators started calling this the Mississippi miracle. But it's not a miracle, it's just good policy. Because one researcher from the University of Toronto found that this improvement was linked to the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, or the LBPA.
What is that?
The Mississippi legislature passed the LBPA in 2013, and that bill did a couple of things. It expanded access to full-day pre-K programs. It focused education on phonics and the science of reading, so it actually changed how we were teaching students how to read. It invested in professional development for teachers because they would need more training. It identified struggling readers and then targeted them for specific interventions. So if a student was falling behind, they got additional help when it came to reading. And finally, some struggling third graders were held back for a year so that they would have more time to build their reading skills. The simple description, though, is that the LBPA took literacy seriously. It gave teachers the training they needed, it focused on struggling readers, and it gave kids time to learn how to read properly.
Okay.
So the LBPA had a very strong impact on those students at the bottom. It helped bring a lot of students from that below basic category to basic, and also students from basic.
I'm just interested in this because I am doing a Magic the Gathering event with Jimmy Wong. Me and Jimmy Wong are teaming up to fight other streamers and Magic players also teamed up. And Jimmy Wong can't read. Yeah, that's what I was getting to. No, it's for charity. And the charity that we picked, I suggested the Jimmy Wong Foundation for giving children orphans jobs in the mines. That's what I wrote on my form. But then I followed up because he didn't have an idea. And I said Reading Partners, which I'll be raising money for, possibly on my stream as well. We're going to raise for Reading Partners. This is a real-life organization that has provably raised literacy in under-resourced kids by providing them one-on-one teaching from paid people and volunteers. It's fucking awesome. You just sit down. Ari is the one that is taught me about it. She has actually worked there and has actually taught kids how to read. And it's really cool. And they got underfunded after Doge cuts. So it's a fucking problem. And so I'm trying to raise money for them because I think it's cool. So we're going to raise money for that. And that's one reason why I was looking at stuff. And that's why I saw this video. And that's why I wanted to watch it. Because it's kind of a problem. Can Ari read? No, that's the thing. That's the crazy thing is my wife can also not read. So when she's teaching them, she's on the fly making it up. She just points to a word and says that word is cereal, but it's like it's not cereal. You know, it's something she just changes. It's vibes-based reading, and it's awesome. The kids love it.
To proficient, it had almost no impact on students who were already
Garnick,
proficient, maybe moving them to the advanced category. But that's to be expected given the kind of interventions that were in the bill. What Mississippi demonstrated is that the decline in American literacy isn't inevitable.
Dude, people talk about vibe coding. It would be fucking awesome to have vibe reading, where everyone in the class has the assigned reading and they pull it out and then you just say whatever you want. You know, you're reading like The Great Gatsby or whatever, and some kid reads his part of the story, made it up. Then it goes to you, and you just take his story wherever you. It's almost like improv. You just take it wherever you want. Yes, and reading, you made it up, and then at the end of the day, you have a new book. Great Gatsby, more like Great Gyatsby. You'd kill in class if you dropped that joke in class. You would fucking slay. Dude, everyone would bust out laughing.
We can solve this problem, and it actually only cost Mississippi $15 million. That sounds like a really big number, but the state's budget is $7.6 billion, so we are talking about fractions here. This doesn't solve every problem. There are still adults in the United States who are functionally illiterate. There are plenty of adults who can read but simply choose not to, and we still need to figure out what to do about college students who can't keep up with assigned reading anymore. But Mississippi's success shows that the literacy crisis can be mitigated. We can help more people learn to read if we're smart about it. Before we go, let me ask you one question. Are you looking for a way to learn more and to stop?
Nope. No, I'm not. I'm good. Maxed out the old brain. Got enough facts for me. Everything I need is all up here. Good vid though.